There are stories that seem to ripple through time, whispering of impossible wealth, breathtaking artistry, and the kind of high adventure that quickens the pulse. You know the ones, tales of lost golden cities sleeping beneath jungle canopies, pirate hordes buried on moonlit beaches, and priceless artifacts that vanished into the dense fog of war. For centuries, these legends have fueled a burning, near-obsessive fire in the hearts of treasure hunters, dedicated scholars, and wide-eyed dreamers. The search becomes an epic, a global scavenger hunt for things that glitter and things that awe. But what happens when that relentless hunt just stops? Not because the treasure has been triumphantly unearthed, but because, collectively, we've decided to let it go. This is a different kind of treasure story. It isn't about the exhilarating thrill of that final earth-shattering discovery, but about the quiet dignity of a good mystery, of a story that finds its true power in being left unfinished. We're going to journey into the legends behind priceless artifacts that disappeared without a single trace. But more importantly, we're asking why the frantic, often desperate search for them slowly faded, leaving behind not bitter frustration, but a peaceful, profound acceptance of wonder. These are the stories of the treasures we almost all agreed to never find. The grand quests that discovered their real resolution not in a tangible discovery, but in the enduring power of the story itself. I want you to imagine a room, but banish all thoughts of wood and plaster, paint and wallpaper. This is no ordinary room. Every single surface, from the ornate floor to the vaulted ceiling, is a breathtaking, seamless mosaic of perfectly fitted amber panels. Each one polished to a gem-like finish and shimmering with an incredible, almost living, inner light. It is a chamber literally spun from fossilized sunlight. Its 6 tons of precious resin backed with shimmering gold leaf and strategically placed mirrors that multiply its unearthly glow into a seemingly infinite, golden dimension. For 200 years, it was known, and with good reason, as the 8th wonder of the world, a masterpiece of Baroque art and a dizzying symbol of pure unadulterated power. And then, in the utter chaos and violence of the Second World War, it was gone. It was methodically disassembled, packed into 27 sturdy wooden crates, and spirited away from its palace home by invading Nazi forces. And then, nothing. The trail goes completely maddeningly cold in a city that is about to be utterly consumed by a storm of fire and bombs. For decades that followed, the hunt for the Amber Room was one of the most intense, globe-spanning treasure searches in modern history, drawing in governments, spies, and fortune hunters alike. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the fever broke. The search didn't truly end. It transformed into something much more complex, and ultimately, more profound. The magnificent story of the Amber Room starts not in the opulent palaces of Russia, but in Prussia, way back in 1701. It was originally conceived as the ultimate flex, a jaw-dropping monument to the power and artistic taste of King Friedrich I. Designed by a brilliant German sculptor and brought to shimmering life by a visionary Danish amber craftsman, it was an international marvel from its very inception. But it was a monumental gift that would ultimately seal its legendary fate. In 1716, in a grand gesture of diplomatic alliance building, King Friedrich's successor gifted the entire still unassembled room to his powerful new ally, Tsar Peter the Great of Russia. Shipped in 18 massive boxers, it finally found its permanent and most famous home in the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg. There, under the patronage of Russian empresses, a team of gifted artisans took it to a whole new level of splendor. Over the passing decades, it grew to cover more than 55 square meters, a dazzling, immersive space constructed from over 6 tons of precious hand-worked amber. People who had the privilege of seeing it wrote about the surreal experience of standing inside a glowing jewel box, a room that seemed alive, its myriad golden panels capturing and amplifying the softest candlelight into a heavenly, all-encompassing glow. It was a private sanctuary for empresses, a symbol of the Russian Empire's immense power and cultural sophistication. It was, by all accounts, priceless. Historians estimate its value today would soar into the hundreds of millions, but even that figure feels hollow and inadequate. How can you possibly put a price tag on a room made of captured light? Its peaceful, protected life was brutally shattered in June of 1941 with Operation Barbarossa. the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union. As German forces closed their iron grip on Leningrad, the terrified curators at the Catherine Palace faced a terrible, impossible choice. They had to evacuate their most precious treasures, but the Amber Room presented a unique and heartbreaking problem. 2 centuries of fluctuating Russian weather had made the delicate amber panels dry and dangerously brittle. When they frantically tried to dismantle the panels, the precious resin began to crumble in their hands. So, in a last-ditch effort born of desperation, they tried to hide it in plain sight, pasting simple, unassuming wallpaper over the world's most famous and spectacular room, praying the invaders would simply walk on by. The ruse, tragically, didn't work. The Nazis knew exactly what they were looking for. They considered the Amber Room a masterpiece of German art, their own lost heritage that had been wrongly gifted away, and they were fiercely determined to reclaim it. In just 36 hours, soldiers had mercilessly ripped the panels from the walls, packed them into 27 crates, and shipped them to Königsberg, Germany. There, it was put on display in the city's Castle Museum, a potent piece of wartime propaganda. But as the tide of war turned against Germany, the room was dismantled once more and stored in the castle's deep, cavernous cellars in early 1944. And that is the last thing anyone knows for sure. In August 1944, Allied bombers turned the city of Königsberg and its historic castle into an inescapable inferno. After the war, the city, which became the Russian territory of Kaliningrad, was little more than a vast, smoldering field of ruins, and the Amber Room was gone. For the next 50 years, the search was relentless, a true obsession of the Cold War. Did the crates burn to ash in the firestorm? That remains the most likely theory, especially since amber is highly flammable. Or were they secretly moved in the final chaotic days of the war? Theories bloomed everywhere. Maybe they were loaded onto a submarine and now sit silently at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. Decades of searching sunken ships have turned up nothing. Maybe they're hidden in a secret Nazi tunnel system. Treasure hunters, driven by hope and obsession, scoured forgotten mines and bunkers across Europe. It was a search that consumed lives, fortunes, and decades of fruitless labor. So why did the search, this global fixation, finally stop? The turning point wasn't a sudden discovery, but a monumental decision. In 1979, the Soviet government made a momentous choice. Instead of pouring ever more resources into a search that was clearly a dead end, they would do something truly incredible. They would bring the Amber Room back to life. They announced a project of epic, almost unimaginable scale, the complete and total reconstruction of the lost wonder. Using only a handful of old black and white photos and a single precious color picture as their guide, a dedicated team of Russian artisans began the painstaking work. For 24 long years they sourced tons of new amber, relearned lost 18th century techniques, and meticulously, lovingly recreated every last floral garland and gilded cherub. Finally, in 2003, for the 300th anniversary of St. Petersburg, the new Amber Room was unveiled in the Catherine Palace, standing proudly in the exact same spot as the original. And with that powerful act of cultural rebirth, the frantic 50-year search quietly ended. The stunning replica offered the world something it desperately needed, a sense of closure. It masterfully shifted the focus from a heartbreaking story of loss to an inspiring one of cultural resilience and unbelievable, painstaking artistry. The world had, in its own way, accepted that the original was gone forever, a beautiful casualty of a brutal war. The legacy of the Amber Room is no longer about a physical object waiting to be found in a dusty crate. It's twofold. First, there is the magnificent reconstruction, a living testament to what can be rebuilt from memory, dedication, and skill. It stands as a symbol not of what was lost, but of what can be reclaimed from the ashes of history. And second, there is the legend. The ghost of the original Amber Room is now arguably more powerful than the room itself. By giving up the physical search, the world allowed the Amber Room to ascend into the realm of pure legend. A golden, shimmering ghost that will forever haunt the imagination with its unattainable, luminous beauty. The search ended, but the wonder never will. History has not been kind to King John of England. He's mostly remembered as the archetypal villain from the Robin Hood stories. A petulant and hapless king who lost his French territories, and was famously forced by his own furious barons to sign the Magna Carta. His reign was a chaotic mess of conflict and betrayal. He was constantly on the move, a nomadic king racing across his own country to fight rivals and stamp out rebellions, and his entire treasury, the very symbol and substance of his rule, traveled with him. And this wasn't just a few chests of gold coins. This was the accumulated wealth of a kingdom: heavy gold goblets, ornate silver plates, currencies for paying his armies, and most importantly, the sacred crown jewels of England. In the fateful month of October of 1216, this mobile treasury would have a date with destiny in one of England's most treacherous and unforgiving landscapes. The setting for this disaster is a place called the Wash, a vast, square-mouthed bay on England's east coast, where several rivers empty into the cold North Sea. Even today, it's a notoriously dangerous landscape of shifting mudflats, quicksand, and disorienting mists that can appear in an instant. 800 years ago, it was even more perilous. At low tide, a causeway of damp, solid-looking ground would appear, offering a tantalizing shortcut that could save days of laborious travel. But taking it was a deadly gamble. The tide in the Wash didn't creep in. It roared in, a veritable wall of churning water that could swallow a man and his horse in a matter of minutes. In the autumn of 1216, King John was in desperately deep trouble. Rebellious barons, aided by an invading French prince, had taken over vast swaths of his country. On October 12th, he was in a frantic rush to get from the town of King's Lynn to the safety of Lincoln. He, being cautious of the route, took the longer, safer road inland. His baggage train, however, a slow, lumbering procession of heavy wagons pulled by struggling horses, was sent on the deadly shortcut across the Wash. It was a catastrophic, history-altering mistake. A medieval chronicler described what happened next with chilling finality. The land itself seemed to open up, and bottomless whirlpools sucked in everything. The entire royal treasury, the sacred regalia of a nation, the very symbols of English monarchy, simply vanished into the churning, muddy water. The disaster seemed to shatter what was left of John's spirit. Already gravely ill with dysentery, he died just a few days later, leaving his 9-year-old son to inherit a broken, war-torn kingdom and a legacy swallowed by the tides. For centuries, the story of King John's lost treasure has been one of England's most tantalizing tales. The search has been going on, in one form or another, for 800 years. In the modern era, hopefuls have brought in metal detectors, ground-penetrating radar, and even sophisticated aerial surveys, but the challenge is simply immense. The primary reason the search has all but officially stopped is the landscape itself. The Wash is not a static place. It is a living, breathing, and constantly changing environment. Over 8 long centuries, rivers have drastically changed their course, and the coastline has shifted by miles. The treasure, if it even survives, is likely buried under many meters of thick silt and clay. The probable area of the disaster is huge, now covering miles upon miles of flat, featureless farmland and marsh. Pinpointing a search area with any degree of accuracy is basically impossible. Even when a new solar farm development in a prime location sparked a flicker of hope in March 2024, archaeologists reluctantly admitted the chances of finding anything are 1,000,000 to 1. The growing skepticism of historians has also played a significant part in dampening the fever. Some, like the historian Dr. Paul Richards, argue that the king, constantly at war and desperate for funds, had probably spent or pawned most of his portable wealth to pay for his mercenary soldiers. The treasure that was actually lost might have been far less spectacular than the glittering hoard the legend leads us to imagine. So, the organized hunt has died down. The quest for King John's jewels is no longer an active professional pursuit, but has instead become a cherished piece of local folklore. And that's where its real, enduring value is now. The story is woven deeply into the identity of the region. It's a dramatic tale told in pubs and by firesides, a source of unique local pride, and a constant, tangible reminder of the dramatic history that unfolded right there on their land. The treasure's worth isn't in gold or jewels anymore, but in its profound power as a story. It's a tale of a famously bad king's final, fitting disaster, a powerful lesson in hubris delivered by the unforgiving forces of nature. We stopped looking because we accepted that the sea, the mud and time itself had claimed it for their own. In letting it go, the story was transformed. It became a shared cultural inheritance, glittering more brightly and enduringly in the telling than the actual jewels ever could. Our next story takes us from the cold, muddy flats of medieval England to the searing, sun-scorched deserts of the American Southwest. This is a legend born from the very heart of the American dream, the intoxicating idea of striking it rich in the vast, untamed wilderness. It's the story of the lost Dutchman's gold mine, which is probably the most famous and enduring lost mine in all of American history. The legend centers on a mysterious German immigrant named Jacob Waltz, who arrived in Arizona during the great prospecting rush of the 19th century. Dutchman was simply a common, if inaccurate, slang term for a German at the time. The story, which has dozens of colorful and often contradictory versions, generally goes like this. Waltz, through some stroke of luck or secret knowledge, discovered a ridiculously rich gold mine hidden deep within the menacing and labyrinthine Superstition Mountains. For years, he supposedly worked this mine in absolute secrecy, periodically appearing in town with pockets full of high-grade gold. On his deathbed in 1891, he finally confessed the mine's location to Julia Thomas, a kindly neighbor who had cared for him in his final days. He left her a box filled with incredibly rich ore and a series of cryptic, tantalizing clues. The mine was near a prominent landmark called Weaver's Needle. You could see a military trail from the entrance. The setting sun would illuminate a key spot on the rock face at a certain time of day. The clues were a maddening mix of the specific and the infuriatingly vague. And with his death, the great hunt was on. For over a century, thousands upon thousands of prospectors, adventurers, and obsessed dreamers, who came to be called Dutch hunters, have poured into the Superstition Mountains. But these mountains are no joke. They're a 160,000-acre labyrinth of treacherous canyons, sheer cliffs, and confusing identical-looking rock formations. The search for gold soon acquired a dark and bloody reputation. Dozens of people have died or simply vanished without a trace while looking for Waltz's mine. The mine, people began to whisper, was cursed. This relentless, often dangerous search went on for decades. But then, slowly, things began to shift. The intense, all-consuming gold fever began to fade. The turning point wasn't a single event, but a slow dawning of scientific reality. Geologists have now extensively surveyed the Superstition Mountains. Their findings are pretty conclusive. The geology of the area is mainly volcanic, which is not the type of rock formation known to contain large motherlode-style gold deposits. There's simply no geological evidence that a massive, rich gold mine ever existed there. Most experts now believe the legend is either a total fabrication from the start, or, more likely, a wildly exaggerated tale of a small, rich pocket of ore that Waltz found and then completely emptied. The serious, organized search for physical gold is effectively over. The U.S. government even designated the Superstition Mountains a protected wilderness area, making any large-scale mining illegal. But people didn't stop coming. The end of the search for gold marked the beginning of a search for something else entirely. This is the heart of why we stopped looking for the lost Dutchman's mine. We found something better. The legacy of Jacob Waltz's mine is no longer about getting rich. It has transformed into a vibrant cultural phenomenon, a shared adventure, a modern pilgrimage. The modern Dutch hunter isn't necessarily looking for gold. They're looking for a tangible connection to history, a physical challenge, and a powerful sense of camaraderie with fellow searchers. The hunt is now a form of recreation, a way to test oneself against the raw beauty and danger of the wilderness. People plan their family vacations around it. For many, the search has become a form of profound escape, a way to find peace and solitude from the constant stresses of modern life. The quest for the mine becomes a metaphor for their own personal journey. The treasure isn't the gold anymore. It's the experience of the hunt itself, the quiet majesty of desert sunsets, the physical exhilaration of the climb, the shared stories and legends told around a campfire. We stopped looking for the Dutchman's gold because the legend itself became far more valuable than the gold ever could be. It's a story that reminds us that treasure doesn't always have to glitter. Sometimes it's the rugged, breathtaking beauty of a mountain, the simple thrill of a shared story, and the quiet, personal satisfaction of a journey that never, ever has to end. Our final story is about a treasure that might not even exist, a map that almost certainly can't be read, and a tantalizing mystery that has moved from the rolling hills of Virginia into the boundless, infinite realm of the human mind. This is the story of the Beale ciphers. 3 intricately encrypted messages that supposedly lead to a massive fortune in gold and silver, but whose true value has become the intellectual puzzle itself. The story, as laid out in a pamphlet published in 1885, goes that around 1820, a charismatic man named Thomas J. Beale and his party of 30 adventurers discovered a massive vein of gold and silver out west. He then undertook the arduous task of transporting this immense fortune back to his home state of Virginia and burying it for safekeeping. To ensure his partners or their heirs could find it, he created 3 complex ciphers. Cipher number 1 described the precise location. Cipher number 2 described the contents of the treasure. And cipher number 3 listed the names of the partners and their next of kin. In 1822, Beale allegedly gave a locked iron box containing the cipher papers to a local innkeeper named Robert Morris's, with the promise that he would mail the key to the codes later. The key never arrived. Thomas J. Beale was never seen or heard from again. Decades later, an aging Morris's gave the box and its baffling contents to a friend. This friend became obsessed, spending 20 years consumed by the puzzle, and he had one huge, tantalizing breakthrough. He managed to solve the second cipher. He brilliantly realized it was a book cipher, with the key being the U.S. Declaration of Independence. The decrypted message was stunning. It described thousands of pounds of gold and silver, plus a large quantity of jewels, with an estimated worth today of over $53 million. It also confirmed the general location of the treasure was in Bedford County, Virginia. But the exact location, the final crucial step, remained securely locked in the seemingly impenetrable first cipher. Frustrated and defeated, the friend published the entire story and all 3 ciphers in a pamphlet in 1885, hoping that someone, somewhere, could finally crack the rest of the code. And so the search began. In the hills of Bedford County, treasure hunters with shovels and high hopes have been digging holes ever since. But the real search was happening elsewhere, in libraries, universities, and the quiet studies of obsessive amateurs. The Beale ciphers became a Mount Everest for both professional and amateur code breakers. The U.S. Army's legendary cryptanalyst William Friedman even used it as a challenging training exercise for his recruits. But as decades of repeated failure piled up, a powerful new theory began to take hold. What if it's all just a brilliant, elaborate hoax? Cryptographers and historians started finding serious holes in the story's fabric. There is no definitive historical proof that a man named Thomas J. Beale ever actually existed. Linguistic analysis of the published documents found anachronisms, like the word stampeding, which wasn't commonly used until decades after the papers were supposedly written. Most evidence now points to the pamphlet's publisher himself as the probable author of the entire fantastic tale. A clever and profitable scheme to sell 50-cent pamphlets to a curious public. This is precisely why the physical search for the Beale treasure is basically over. The overwhelming consensus among experts is that it's a wonderfully crafted piece of 19th century fiction. But the intellectual search, that has never stopped, and likely never will. The enduring legacy of the Beale ciphers is a powerful testament to our innate human love of a good puzzle. It has become a purely intellectual treasure, a mental exercise of the highest order. It exists today in sprawling online forums, in academic papers on cryptography, and in the passionate late-night arguments of amateur sleuths around the world. People aren't looking for gold anymore. They're looking for that sublime aha moment, the intellectual thrill of cracking the uncrackable code. The joy is in the sheer elegance of the problem itself. Believing it's a hoax doesn't even deter the true fans. For them, that's just another fascinating layer of the mystery. The search has left the physical world far behind, and now exists only in the limitless landscape of our collective imagination. We gave up on the gold and silver, and in doing so we preserved the real treasure, a perfect, gloriously unsolved mystery that will continue to challenge, delight, and mystify us for centuries to come. It's a treasure hunt where the map itself is the ultimate prize. These stories of a resurrected amber palace, a royal fortune claimed forever by the sea, a mythical gold mine that inspires life-changing adventure, and a cryptic code that became its own magnificent reward, all show us that a treasure's value isn't always in the physical object. Sometimes, the greatest and most lasting worth is in the legend it leaves behind, in the quiet, collective acceptance that some things are better left to the realm of wonder. What other mysteries do you think have found a peaceful, unspoken end, their stories becoming more valuable than their discovery? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this journey into the quiet, mysterious corners of history, think about subscribing so you don't miss our next exploration. It's just human nature to be drawn to the hunt. We are a species driven by a deep-seated desire for answers, for closure, for finding that final missing piece of the puzzle. And the pursuit of lost treasure is perhaps the purest, most romantic form of that fundamental drive. But the stories we've explored today suggest a different kind of ending, one that's quieter, more subtle, and in many ways, far more profound. They teach us the unexpected value of letting go. The search for the Amber Room didn't end in bitter failure. It transformed into a monumental act of creation and remembrance, proving that the spirit of a masterpiece can be resurrected from memory and dedication. The quest for King John's jewels didn't end in sheer frustration. It dissolved into the fabric of folklore, becoming a foundational story for an entire region of England. The frantic hunt for the lost Dutchman's gold didn't just stop. It evolved into something richer. The base allure of gold was replaced by the profound and personal allure of the journey itself, and the intellectual war waged against the Beale ciphers became purely a battle of wits, where the prize is the beauty of the puzzle itself. In each of these remarkable cases, the relentless decades-long search reached a crucial turning point. It was a moment of collective, unspoken acceptance, a realization that the physical treasure was either gone forever or, perhaps, had never existed at all. And in that acceptance, something truly remarkable happened. The value was seamlessly transferred from the object to the story, from the glittering gold to the enduring legend. These treasures weren't truly lost. In a way, they were liberated. They became something larger, something that couldn't be locked away in a vault or put behind glass in a museum. They became a permanent and cherished part of our shared human imagination. There is a unique and lasting peace to be found in an unanswered question, a strange comfort in a mystery that's allowed to just be a mystery. It leaves vital room for wonder, for curiosity, and for the thrilling idea that the world still holds deep and beautiful secrets. By giving up the search, we aren't admitting defeat. We are, in a more profound sense, choosing to preserve the magic. We're acknowledging that not every story needs a neat and tidy ending to be complete, and that sometimes, the greatest treasures we have are the stories themselves.